Alright, it is 9:54. I had one trade and I didn't trade INKW, but this was a setup that I would have been interested in. I missed out on it because I decided to look at another stock, STEK, once this one actually started to develop. But I was interested in this one because it was breaking above the 15 level and they had like a second green day, and then today opened up a little higher. And I thought, it could do something where it has a morning spike or maybe it has like a dip and rip, and maybe if it does a dip and rip, it might drop towards the previous day close and then hold support and then do a morning spike. I was watching it, but then I started to look at STEK because I saw that it was dropping. Unfortunately, that meant that I missed out. I was interested in buying because it was a big seller at 15.5, and once that seller was taken out right here, it did lead to a morning spike. It got as high as 17. This was way better than the other trade I had with INKW, the way it traded. This one was way better. This one doesn't really show it, but eventually, I failed to do anything here to have a morning spike or a dip rip, but then it just did like a really lame breakout later in the day and it went as high as 17. This was a lot cleaner right here. Unfortunately, I missed out again because I was looking at STEK once it was finally breaking past the 155, big seller. And I did trade STEK. I learned from my lesson last week. I didn't try to buy this thing when it was still under the downtrending trend line. I only had an interest once it was above it because it is a high spread, high priced OTC. And this was essentially like a morning panic bounce play higher low at 9:38. I bought 20 shares at 5:34. Right here at 9:38, at 5:34 is when I got in right here. So the idea was that it had the drop from the sixes all the way to the bottom of five, and then it uptrended, and then it downtrended, and then I was getting in. Ideally, it was gonna hold above this low right here, and then make a move towards VWAP. That was the idea. And I actually did the thing that I talked about in the weekly recap that I've been trying to get better at. When a setup does like a morning panic bounce play, for example, this one right here, and then ideally I'd be in, but not in this one because it's a high, priced, high spread OTC. But ideally I'm in, and then I sell on the uptrend, and then it breaks above the uptrending trend line, and then it downtrends. Ideally makes a higher low, and then I sell into the next uptrend, ideally in a VWAP. I got in it right here, and I would have been normally completely out once it was starting to show that it wasn't going to continue the uptrend. I probably would have had a trend line like this, right? Or maybe even something off of this original wick, for example. I was in it right here at 5, not 5, 9:38 right here. And then I would have probably have gone out by the time it broke past this trend line. But I thought, let's try to do the thing I was talking about. I did sell half of my position at 9:42 at 5:39, which was right here, right when it was going to break under it the first time, is when I sold. And then I held for the thing that it was going to ideally be a higher low, which it ended up doing, but super close to the bottom, a little too sketchy. I actually, a few moments, I was interested in buying back to 10 shares when it was at like 528, but I didn't do it. I was just going to stick to the principle, the thing that I'm trying to get better at. And then I did sell because it did make a higher low. It didn't break the day low, which it could have done. And I sold into the uptrend. It didn't get to VWAP, unfortunately, but I did try. And I sold the last 10 shares at 548, and that was at 952. Right here is when I got out of my last piece. So again, I bought right here, and then I sold right here, and then I sold the rest right here. That was my attempt. It would have been so much more profitable if I traded INKW because it went from 15.5 to 17. But that's pretty much about it. And I wouldn't have, held half of my position or something like that once the trend line here broke. Maybe a trend line from these two levels. I wouldn't have held. I would have gone out because it's a morning spike. It's not a dip buy setup. But yeah, just one trade with STEK. I don't think I'm going to trade this one anymore. Missed opportunity once again with INKW. I'll be looking for more setups, but this is what I have for right now. Alright, it is 10:27 and I want to go over a trade I had with SQQQ, and I'm actually not too happy with the way I traded this one. But the idea with SQQQ is that this is a stock that trades the SPY, but it's almost like a short position. So you can see SPY, if you buy SPY, you want to sell for a higher price. Well, SQQQ, you're going to buy this and you're going to sell it for ideally a higher price and you make a profit, but it goes up because SPY goes down. So if you look at it right here at 959, it had a top. And if you look at SQQQ, 959, this was the bottom. It trades the opposite. It lets you be in a short position without actually shorting. You're just buying the inverse here with SQQQ. And this was essentially something that I wanted to have for a longer period of time. I thought this thing could have been something where I could short it, ideally, with the SQQQ. I'm in a long position with SQQQ, but the idea is that it might try to top right here eventually. And I've seen the top so many times, but I've always hesitated with these kinds of things. And ideally, I should still be long the position, but I just don't like losing profits. The idea with this one right here is that it's just up, on a pretty exaggerated uptrend if you ask me, but it can obviously just keep going, why not? And I just figured that it could be something that could eventually just top. I liked the resistance levels, the support levels. I liked how it was right at that level. I liked how it was above the EMA 4 many times in a row. And it might still try to finish, green on the day. And my worry was that this thing right here was trading with VWAP. So essentially, I was long SQQQ, and I had a $5 risk level. My idea was that I was in at 10:01, which was right here. 10:01 at this 34:07, I'll call it right here. And I thought worst case scenario is going to downtrend, so SPY goes up, and then we break the day low right here, and then with slippage, I'll be out just $5. That was the idea with that, and it didn't happen. I did have a stop at 33.79, which was going to be below the wick here a little bit, and it did uptrend. As you can see, it did uptrend, but when I looked at SPY, I just hate stocks that trade around VWAP because VWAP is super important with so many stocks, and I know this is more of like an ETF or an index, but yeah, this was my fear that it was going to do something like this, and I did have a trend line. I'll actually switch to the other screen just briefly. So you can see this is the other screen. So essentially when it looked like it was going to break past the trend line right here, I did get out of my position, and I didn't like how I had to stop because when I placed my order to get out of the position immediately, it didn't get out of it immediately because I had to cancel the stop order. So that kind of threw me off. But I did get out essentially right around here, which translates to the price of 34 and a half. So I got out right around here, 34 right around there, and the time was 10:18. So 10:18 was right here, 34. As you can see, I mean, I could have sold a bit higher, but again, I had a delay there because I had to cancel the stop order first. But I did get out right here, and I was long at, again, just to go over at 10:01, which was right here at this 34.07 level. So right around right here. So I got in here and I got out right around there. And it looks like an inverse head and shoulder. Shoulder, head, and maybe I'll try to make a shoulder and then uptrend later. But I mean, I wanted to hold on to this a bit longer, but I just don't like when it just does this price action holding around VWAP because a lot of them can do stuff like that, the overall markets. And it's uptrending now, but if I was a big baller, I'd still be having my position and I'd only get out if it breaks a day high for my loss and maybe, it'll make an uptrend here above VWAP, but it'll be lower than here, or maybe it makes a double top and it just fails eventually and it downtrends more. But I hate, seeing profits go away. It just seems kind of dumb to just hold on to a position when you're up and then lose when you get out of the position for a loss. It just seems really dumb to do something like that. And this is my Schwab account. This is not a cash account. This is a PDT account, so I wasn't able to perhaps sell half of my position here, which would have been fine. So yeah, that's the case with that. I will make an update later as to what this one does. I did make $7 at one point. I was up over $10, but again, I had a bit of an issue there. I probably would have made like $9 or $8 if I was able to sell immediately when I wanted to. But yeah, that's pretty much the case right now, and I'll keep looking for more setups. Alright, it is 4:58 and I'm here to call it off. Overall, I'm going to be up on a day $9.64, and that was that one trade betting against the market with my swing trading account. Let me switch to that. It's going to be this one right here. And I mean, it did uptrend. It did do the thing I wanted it to do, but I really wanted to hold on to it for a longer period of time. And this one eventually did not work out. It did break the low, which would have been the high, to the point where it went from red to green, the overall S&P 500. And yeah, it would have been a loser, but I did get out of my position, which was way back here at 10:18. Right around here is when I got out. I just don't like it because the overall market really plays around VWAP, and it's kind of strange, but it also makes sense because a lot of people who are probably day trading the overall markets use VWAP, and it's a pretty important level. It just wasn't able to break under the VWAP line and then stay well below it. The overall markets. In fact, it actually held it pretty nicely overall. As you can see, this was the first dip, and then it had a few more, but it eventually broke past it, and that was the case with this one right here. I do regret missing out on STEK, even though at this point right here it wasn't really down like 20% on the day. It was something that I was looking at. I just didn't see it, but this thing did make a move eventually. Not with very much volume, but it did make a move from the 530s. It got as high as the 680s. I probably would have been interested in it if I saw it either on the dip right here or maybe the break past VWAP. And then I wouldn't have held all the way up there, obviously, but I would have tried to have maybe held here. And then maybe if it had this red candle and it had more volume, it could be like the higher low to hold and then maybe a sell back. I want to be able to be a part of something like this, especially on a stock that has a little more volume than STEK. I'm pretty happy that I did try that morning panic bounce play, and I didn't make very much because there wasn't a lot of meat on the bone in terms of this setup right here, but this was pretty nice. I just was not able to be a part of it. SIRC was okay. It did offer like this trend line break. It did turn around, but I don't like how choppy this one looks. And SING is nothing really cool. INKW, I guess it did break the day high, and then it kind of came back a little. I don't think I would have traded something like this, but I totally regret missing out in the beginning. At least it was for a good reason because I went to look at another stock. It wasn't because I hesitated or something like that. And this one was also uptrending. I never traded it because it didn't really have that much volume. That's really it for today. Yeah, just had that trade with STEK that, in theory, I did something good trying to hold after it, doesn't uptrend in the original trend line, but then sell into the next move towards the upside. And I could have actually bought more shares. I think I needed to have more shares to trade a proper $40 risk level. A few things I could have done better, and I feel like maybe I could have even tried to have been more aggressive with the other setup. But overall, I think it's okay. That's all I have for today.